When we consider the ancient culture of the Minoans, while historians and archaeologists praise the wealth of their various cultural artifacts, their splendid art and architecture, the common refrain is often heard that still, because we have not fully deciphered their language, known as Linear A, much of what we have to interpret concerning this great civilization arrives from a pile of ruins. And so we figure that there's not much to really be learned, nothing to gain from evidence based upon mere rubbish, debris mixed with dirt and rock. And we would, of course, be mistaken. What surprises me is how much we underestimate what archaeology can tell us about the material culture from what people and civilizations leave behind. There is this undercurrent, I would say, of arrogance that because we cannot decipher what they've written, we cannot truly understand the civilization. We did the same with the great Indus Valley civilization, too. Here, we cannot decipher their language either. So we place them in this nebulous category whereby nothing can be truly understood. This is totally unfair as an evaluation and reflects the attitudes of many, but certainly not all, historians towards archaeology, a science they often do not completely understand. We have more than enough information available to us from ancient times, for we have everything save their words. For through archaeology, we know where and how they lived, what they looked like, what they wore, what they ate, where and what they worshiped, what they did for relaxation, how they viewed the world through their art, and so much more. And if we wish to have written sources, it's not like anyone else didn't write about them. The Egyptians and the Hittites, in addition to stories of them carried down through the Mycenaeans, as well as stories carried down from about themselves, by the way, into the Roman period. We have to recollect that, like the Mayans, the Minoans did not end with the fall of their civilization, but were still around, talking and carrying down some of their traditions into the first century BCE, and they were known by the Romans as the Eteocretans. So they didn't just stop, they're still there. You can go to Crete right now and sit and meet with people who were the ancient Minoans. We know this through DNA, haplogroups. Is this making any sense? You guys getting this? So, according to Egyptian accounts, those who lived on Crete were known as the Kiftu, Keftiu. In the tomb of the female pharaoh Hatshepsut, those identified as the Kiftu are depicted as giving her gifts, including vases and other gifts as tribute, as they are wearing outfits that are most definitely Minoan, dating to the late Minoan period. Now, sorry about that. Now, this image right here. Now we go to the image. The tomb of the vizier of the pharaoh by the name of Rickmeyer from around 1479 to 1425 BCE depicts the Kiftu as bringing gifts as well. They are shown as, well, I mean, they're rather muscular men, right? Carrying elaborate vases and chalices of gold. The inscription declares that the chiefs of the islands in the midst of the great green come bearing their gifts, bowing down to beg breath for their nostrils from the great majesty of their majesty. Now, the reference to the great green is a phrase often used concerning the seas around the Minoan islands. Amenhotep III, reigned from 1386 to 1349, refers to place names connected with the Kiftu. They're all, of course, located on Crete. He mentions a place known as Kanesh, which is Kenosis, a place known as Beshutz, which is Festos, a place by the name of Omnish, which is Amissus, a place known as Kitni, which is Kydonia, and a place known as Likit, which is Liktos. So the identification of the Kiftu with Crete is not in dispute. Amenhotep III called him that. I think it's pretty cool. I mean, yeah, we call them Minoans, but I always find it interesting to know what the Minoans called themselves. And maybe I will make this slight suggestion. Maybe we should start calling them the Kiftu, because that's how they understood themselves to be. Now, a little bit of an additional point. Many Babylonian sources in Akkadian refers to them as the Kaptaru, which you can see there's a connection with Kiftu. This means land beyond the sea. So let's look at me for a little bit. I love this image, great image made by the Egyptians. According to the Iliad and the Odyssey, attributed to Homer around the 8th century BCE or a little earlier, those on Crete were associated with the wise King Minos, along with the story of the Minotaur and the Labyrinth. Also, according to the works attributed to Homer, Crete was occupied by people speaking 5 different languages, including the Achaeans, the Cadonians, we heard about them already, the Dorians, the Pelasgians, and of course, the Aetio-Cretans. These were viewed as the authentic Cretans, those we call the Minoans today. Yet, when you look at a standard world civilization textbook, you see that this great civilization is regulated to a few paragraphs, if that, right? All because, again, because we can't decipher their language. How ridiculous is that? And worse still, they're lumped together with the Greeks. Now, I must say right now, the Minoans are not Greeks. I love the Greeks. I love Greek civilization. I find the Mycenaeans interesting as well as others, but I just want to make it very clear, just because I enjoy learning all about the ancient Greeks and appreciate their culture, let's not add to it artificially, because the Minoans are not Greek in any shape or form. In fact, they would not like this label. They were a civilization whose views were very much against those of the arriving Mycenaeans, who would eventually envelop their civilization. They were a non-Indo-European people, manifestly so. So let's take a look at this incredible civilization, shall we? So if they're not Indo-European, where did the Minoans come from? Now, for a long time, this was a point of controversy, but let's go there right now. So first of all, Crete was occupied by another group of people even before the Minoans arrive. For it's always problematic to assert that any group arrived anywhere first, right? As far as we can determine, the first wave of people arrived from Asia Minor or Anatolia. This is current day Turkey, around the 7th millennium BCE, and continued to come over, wave after wave from different parts of the region over the years. In 2013, evidence from mitochondria DNA was sampled from 37 Minoan skeletons discovered in a cave in east central Crete, and they were compared with 135 modern skeletons. So they compared the 37 Minoan skeletons with 135 modern skeletons as mixed in with some ancient skeletons. And there was absolutely No African mitochondria DNA in it, no haplogroups whatsoever, or stretches of DNA, but only those connected they found with early settlers in Eurasia. They traced their arrival to Crete back to around 9,000 years, placing the time frame around 7,000 BCE. They were closest in identity with the Neolithic populations from southern Europe, but also, of course, Anatolia. There's kind of a fluidity between Anatolia and Southeast Europe, back and forth. So that's the first kind of wave. The next wave of population happened around 4,000 BCE. Groups began to appear from the Syrian Lebanese coast, possibly the Byblos region. And these people, as determined through the remains, had looking at them, looking at the skeletal remains, they seem to have longer heads, like narrower faces, and they were rather short. Okay. But they were not enough in numbers to really dramatically change the ethnic makeup from the first settlers. So we do have an infusion from the Middle East. Now, yet through archaeological evidence stemming from the settlement patterns, it appears the Minoan civilization received its, how do I say it, cultural spark from the next group that arrived from Asia Minor, Anatolia, migrating to the island of Crete around 3000 BCE, bringing with them bronze technology. These people had broader skulls and were closely related to those who arrived around earlier in 7000 BCE. So you do have wave after wave, but you do notice there's no Indo-European blood. So looking from a scientific perspective, nothing from the north coast of Africa. I must stress that unlike the Mycenaeans, the Minoans were again a non-Indo-European people, and so were not part of the typical conventions of Indo-European culture that later become prevalent throughout the Mediterranean world and into Persia, and of course into northern India. Naturally, because the Minoans were a non-Indo-European people, they spoke a non-Hellenic language that in no way connects with how do I say it, with Greek. There are words in Greek that come from Minoan, but it's not part of the evolution of the Greek language. The people and the language appear to have continued long after the collapse of the civilization. In Book 9 of the Odyssey, Homer provides evidence that the original Minoans, as we mentioned already, the Eteocretans, still thrived on Crete. And we do have evidence that goes into the Roman period. We know that at least the language itself, the Minoan language, continued to at least, we have evidence of it, at least until 140 BCE, which I find is interesting. And I think there needs to be more work done on Crete in connection with the later derivatives of the Minoan language and connecting to the Greek that's being used there. And I think there's some answers when it comes to the decipherment of language. There's a few scholars that are working on that, and I'll bring them up in a little bit. But I think this is truly fascinating. The Minoans thrived on Crete from 3000 BCE. They thrived to around 1500 BCE. They don't end. They continue to 14, 13, 12. They're not going anywhere. Once again, we're back to this idea like the Mayans. The Mayans are the Mayan civilization, the collapse of the Mayans, and it's over. And the Mayans are like, we're here. It's 2025. So it's kind of the same thing. But the height of their civilization, where in a sense they have possession of it, I should say. They built the magnificent palaces at Knossos, at Phaistos, at Katazakros, right? They had plenty of natural resources. Let's take a look at the next image, I should say. Plenty of natural resources, which is ideal, right? So here we go. So they had vast and deep forests on the island for timber, right? Much coveted by the Egyptians. They had perfect soil for vineyards, resulting in, by the way, some of the best tasting wine. And some of the Cretans today say, hey, we still have the best wine. They had abundant olive groves. And so Minoan olive oil became very well known. Certainly, the Minoans had enough resources to create a very elaborate trade network. They also traded in wool and ceramics. We find Minoan ceramics in all these different places and bronze vessels. So you can see here some of the trade networks. In addition to these foundational staples, the Minoans traded heavily in a spice known as saffron, extracted from the saffron crocus flower. This spice is often used in the cuisine of India today, so you can imagine Minoan foods as accented by this delicious spice. Let's go to the next image. So once again, if you want to make a Minoan recipe, think of adding saffron to it. Saffron gatherers are shown uh, as very busy in their trade on a fresco discovered at Santorini. One fresco displays a lady gathering saffron, having a tight fitting blue cap with a place, as you can see here, for her ponytail to peek out. Large hoop earrings. He's really dressed up. What looks like an orange jacket and billowy pants with accented horizontal lines of blue, white, and burnt orange. A typical Minoan style, except for the jacket. She is indeed topless. This is again the Minoan way. Next image. There is also a fresco of another saffron collector from Akrotiri that was buried by the eruption of Thera in the 17th century BCE. Likewise displays the same kind of billowy pants on the gatherer and hoop earrings too. If you're going to go out saffron gathering, you got to make sure you put on your best hoop earrings. And take a look. Note the elaborate hairstyle with its tight curls and ringlets there. Wow, she's just really in style there. Very colorful, very lively, if you hadn't noticed, right? Let's go to the next one. A third saffron collector. She has a little longer hair, but all of these are notably dressed up for the occasion. For the gathering of saffron itself was more than simply gathering to trade something. It is a meditative action. It is a religious rite that needed to be properly observed. You are going to go out there wearing your finery, looking good, because we see, once again, how do we know this? Because we see the context behind where these images are. And so this context here, yes, it's natural, it's idyllic, but oftentimes there are religious features that are mixed in, if you understand Minoan religion. And so you realize that this is still a sacred action. Of course, it also could be that, she's like, if you're going to make an image of me, make sure I'm dressed up to the nines. I don't know. Just saying that. So let's go to the next image. So the Minoan writing system was known as Linear A to differentiate it from Linear B. Of course, that Linear B is connected to the later Mycenaeans. Linear A becomes apparent within the archaeological record sometime before 2200 BCE. So 2200 BCE, suddenly there seems to be a record of it. It seems to be in the material culture appearing. So it doesn't appear early on around 3000 BC. So it is a later development. Now some say that take a look at this. I must say that even a cursory examination of Linear A reveals much of what was written down. I mean, despite the fact that we cannot make it all out, um, we can just realize that there seems to be based on roughly precedents that we see established by the Egyptian hieroglyphs, which would later evolve into a linear script, right? It is also largely constitutes these lists, long lists of items. For all of the writing seems to be one thing, and that is accounts and records. Much like we have discovered with the Sumerians, Babylonians, and the Hittites, the Minoans were very much into record keeping of financial transactions. Let's take a look at me a little bit there so you get to see this nice image there. In fact, they have such a plethora of these accounts. They seem to be more concerned with record keeping than many. Fortunately, this is where our knowledge from outside sources come into play. For the Minoans' reputation amongst the Egyptians was one of being very diligent business entrepreneurs, for they were mercantile people. Scholars have made some significant strides in deciphering linear A, even though we cannot read it as of yet. We do have some ideas. Oh, I'll bring up a few. For example, during the 1980s, Dr. Kjell Aratun, who is a seasoned expert of Old Semitic languages, was able to decipher a few words from the hieroglyphic script from a Minoan disc discovered at Phaistos. Let's take a look at that disc right now, which dates to around 1600 BCE, and from there was able to identify some of the phonetic script on the other side. Dr. Kjell Artun identified linear A. He believed that it was associated with the South Semitic script from the region he believed that is now Yemen and Ethiopia. He publishes this in the Menoshis Schrift, Sprache and Text, that was published in 1992 and published again in 1997. Now, what's interesting, before we go any further, according to Pliny the Elder, a people known as the Minoans lived in what is now Yemen. This is Pliny. Now, Pliny lived in the 1st century BCE into the 1st century CE. He died in the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 CE. So he says there's a group known as the Minoans who lived in what is now Yemen and had as their neighbor the Sabians. Furthermore, Pliny states the Minoans claimed a direct connection to the King Minos of Crete. Hence, that's why they're called Minoans. And so this is what and so we know that the Minoans dominated the region at least around 1200 BCE, but they began to decline around 1000 and were conquered by the Sabians around 750 BC. Perhaps the Minoans returned to the region where they originated. I don't know. I'm just saying this is one theory, but not the only theory by far. Okay, so let's look at me a little bit. But yeah, so what's another theory? Well, there's some obvious ones. If you examine linear A script, we realize there exists some direct connections with Mycenaean linear B script. Obviously, for example, the logograms. Logograms, these are the picture signs, turn out to be very similar, if not the same. For example, for commodities like olives, figs, wine, grain, and oils, for those products, the Minoans and Mycenaeans have pretty much the same symbol. So if you're looking for, so you're taking a look at records and you see, the ideogram for olives, it will be oftentimes the same between the Minoan and Mycenaean tablets. or figs or wine or grain or oil. So we know they're talking about commodities because we see these, if the ideograms are in the inscription. Now, also, with the parts that are phonetic, the phonetic names of places overlap too. Like, for example, Phaistos, Pa Itu, they will overlap. So we take a look, and if it's a phonetic aspects, we realize that what is written by the Minoans when it comes to place names often will be the same as it is in Mycenaean. So now we got some commodities and we got some place names thrown in. It turns out, in addition, personal names oftentimes slide over from one to the other. And of course, the names of gods and goddesses. And so we see the names of gods and goddesses. So we have proper nouns that are shared that can be figured out. And you're thinking we're done. No, we're not. It turns out, most people don't know this, is that there's long story really short, is the Hittites are like, wow, we're going way off here. Yeah. When the Hittites came down into Anatolia, they had another group that's with them called the Luvians. While the Hittites dominated the Anatolian plateau, the Luvians dominated the coastal areas. The coastal areas right across from, yes, where the Minoans are. And the Minoans interacted with the Luvians, and through the interaction, we've got 80 Luvian loan words in the Minoan language. And so these words can be figured out also. So it's not like we look at a Minoan tablet and we have no idea what's going on. Oftentimes we know a lot about what's going on to a certain degree, but just not everything, the full context. I hope that helps. Also, there are a few Minoan loan words that appear, go into ancient Greek. I'll give an example because I know you're curious, right? So for example, for the Greek word leirion, it derives from the Minoan letri, which means in English lily. In Greek, the word krokus derives from the Minoan word koruku, which means saffron. The Greek word eleia derives from elewa, which is the Minoan word for olive, right? And you have rodon in Greek from orada, which means rose. By the way, one of the earliest civilizations to really appreciate the beauty of the rose happens to be the Minoans. Even the word sandalis. Sandalis arise from the Minoan precedents. Sandalis means sandals. So every time you strap on your sandals, think, hey, I know a word of Minoan. Okay. Sorry, no, that was fun. Now, as I mentioned, archaeological evidence supports the fact that the Minoans kept records of everything. We can figure it out other ways. With a well-developed archival system that was based upon a leadership hierarchy, very much concerned with financial matters. In short, the form of government appears to be a bureaucratic monarchy. Let's take a look at the next image. Bureaucratic monarchy. And while evidence stemming from the images discovered within the palaces and in depictions of palace officials in their artwork revealed that this government was dominated by religious functionaries as much as bureaucrats, and that the monarch did have some religious duties. The main duty appears to be running the Minoan government along business lines, with the monarch acting more like a chief entrepreneur or a CEO of a Cretan state, more than a religious leader per se, which was more along the Mesopotamian and Egyptian styles of government. I love this image here. You can see people are just busy working away. And I mean, look at these figures, right? Minoan palaces and cities were always so brightly painted. Now, harnessing the exactitude of a legion of scribes and bureaucrats, with every single transaction itemized, every means of production regulated, the Minoan monarch focused the weight of his power or her power on ensuring that the economy of the state was tightly under his grip and extremely efficient, perhaps even ruthlessly so. Because of the centralized palace economic policies, the Minoans were able to enjoy a sense of prosperity unlike any of her neighbors, of the other ancient empires and kingdoms, to the point where the share of wealth became more equally distributed, which we'll look into in a little bit. I think this is pretty amazing. Let's go to the next image. Now, oh, I love this image so much. Okay. The Minoans' efficient policies enabled them to create an advanced mercantile fleet that they were able to trade as a result near and far, from one corner of the Mediterranean to the other, and even beyond that. For a long time, many scholars theorized that the Minoans were a sea power, a thalassocracy, right? That challenged her rivals for ownership of the seas. But as we investigate the images of their supposed warships from various images and we see frescoes, they are nothing in comparison to the Egyptian military vessels, and they appear more to be defensive than offensive in their general makeup, more to protect the merchandise from pirates than in conquering territories or having prolonged naval engagements. They had, in essence, a mercantile fleet. So we take a look at this image. In one fresco found in room 5 of the West House at Akrotiri in Santorini, a small rowing boat, you see here, is leaving a town with 5 oarsmen, a helmsman behind, and what appears to be a very important person in a chair or a throne. Perhaps this was a dignitary of some kind. Just how brightly colorful the city is behind the scene should also be noted, including golden yellow bricks and cyan blue paint covering the other walls. Also notice the interaction of this metropolis with its natural surroundings. You can see, look above, you see even there's some leaping deer here. Next image, another fresco shows 2 larger oar boats with 9 oarsmen, a helmsman, and a dignitary. In this scene, instead of leaping deer, we have, well, it looks like a leaping dolphin. Again, a reminder of the natural world. Next image. Another image of Minoans on their vessel revealed really here. Look at this. There's a sense of tranquility, even leisure, wherever they were, as we see from their art. The Minoans viewed themselves as part of nature rather than separate from it. And there is a sense of harmony, a sense of balance that exudes from their pictorial presentations that were displayed in palaces as well as humble homes alike. Again, take a look at this image. You have, yes, you do have the Minoan vessel, but you also have so much life around. There seem to be connecting within the same context as these very beautifully painted dolphins. So Minoans can do dolphins pretty well, I would say. It's kind of funny later on. when you get to the Greeks and Romans, sometimes is not as good. The ones in Ephesus, it's like, what is this? It's like a dolphin. What's wrong with his face? But the Minoans, they're sleek. They're beautiful. If you take a look at even the coloring of the dolphin right here. You get the blues and the reds being used as shadows, but also there seems to be a little bit of an abstract notion here. Just there's a lot of almost impressionistic in a little bit. So next image. Well, guess what? A Minoan shipwreck was discovered off the coast of Crete. So why not, uh, you know, uh, oh, through underwater archaeological studies that went from 2003 to 2010 and to 11 even, 60 ceramic vessels, including an oval mouth amphora, were retrieved from the site located 131 feet below the surface. The vessel was about 32 to 50 feet long and probably dates between 1800 to 1700 BCE. So we have found a Minoan shipwreck. Next image. As for their trade, as mentioned, it was quite extensive. The Minoans appear frequently in Egyptian art for the time of the Middle Kingdom. And so they were no stranger to Egypt. There's this one image from the tomb of Hatshepsut showing this great entourage of gifts that were bestowed upon whoever they were given it to. And the whole entourage was led by this merchant, and she looks pretty great in her outfit. So women as well as men could be involved in the merchant enterprise. So there you have that too. So beyond Egypt, the Minoans were also very pervasive in Asia Minor, especially along the west coast, which come as no surprise that the Minoans were in this area. So the Minoans appear to have established two or more colonies in Anatolia, in Asia Minor. One was at Miletus, which later on would be under Mycenaean control, and that's, of course, here as Milawanda. And the other was at Ephesus, which was known as Apasa. Once again, there will be some influence. It will not be as direct as the Mycenaeans at Milawanda, but well, let's take a look at the evidence from Ephesus. So I was there at the time when they excavated some Minoan ruins that was directly below the Aya Saluk Hill. Let's go to the next image and let's take a look. So this is the Aya Saluk Hill that overlooks the temple of Artemis, supposedly within this later Seljuk castle. Inside is the high oratorium dedicated to the Apostle John, where supposedly John wrote the book of the Gospel of John. So let's take a look at the next image. But below this castle is is some Minoan evidence that I'm hoping is published. Let's go to the next image. So there you go. You can see where its placement is. Typically, once we excavate it, we bury it up again. But it's kind of fun to see. The Minoans were here. Next image. There we go. So yeah. And they have discovered Mycenaean ruins here too, specifically a tomb and a few other items. So that's pretty great. Okay. I think that's it for those pictures. So you can put those down. The Minoans traded with the less complicated, sophistication, say, tribal clans of the Greek mainland. Of course, the Minoans traded with nearby Cyprus, the Syro-Lebanese coast, and even amongst the Canaanites. In fact, in 2009, Minoan frescoes and other artifacts were discovered during excavations of the Canaanite palace at Tel Kabri in Israel today. They also moved all about the Black Sea and the Mediterranean Sea, all the way to the Straits of Gibraltar and even before, so beyond. So we find evidence of the Minoans all the way to Spain and Morocco. Their various products. Of course, many of you are thinking, well, those kind of the pillars of Hercules, this corresponds with what Plato talked about of Atlantis. That goes all the way, their territories go all the way to this, to the pillars, which are the Straits of Gibraltar. Well, you can think that, but it looks like it's mostly just trade from what we see in evidence, right? All of this mercantile activity had a very dramatic impact upon Minoan society. For, as I mentioned before, the intensive trade brought an unusual amount of wealth to the Minoans, enabling the civilization to finance, I should say, extensive building projects, enable amazing technological advances, and create a society where artisans could differentiate into activities that were more leisurely oriented because of surpluses of revenue. In fact, the mass of wealth became increasingly equally distributed amongst the Minoans than in any other contemporaneous civilization, with the notable exception of the Indus Valley civilization. Now, how? How can we know this? You're asking the question. Now, before you think that I'm just saying this out of reasons of deduction based upon all the evidence of a highly sophisticated central bureaucracy and all the remnants of Minoan trade throughout the Mediterranean world, and archaeology, however, supporting this hypothesis, but we can visibly recognize the more widespread distribution of wealth from the domestic structures that they have left behind. I am serious. Up until, for example, the 16th century BCE, most homes about the Mediterranean and beyond were single room dwellings. Sure, you had the great homes centered around the courtyards. Later on, you will see that this continues. Small rooms, except for the villas of the Greeks and Romans. Most people, however, on average, lived in a very small home. In fact, on average, most people lived in one-room dwelling places. In contrast, the Minoans, on average, lived in multi-room dwellings, even amongst those who were not wealthy. In fact, wealth was really well spread amongst the classes. Case in point, the Minoan city of Gorinia. Even in the poorest sections of town, many of the people are still living within houses that range from 4 to 6 rooms each, relatively palatial in compared to the domestic dwellings of the Hittites or the Egyptians. In addition, much like the Indus Valley civilization, the Minoans employed elaborate plumbing systems in their palaces and even in some cases in their regular sized homes, right? So this is a knowledge that ceases with the fall of the society. Interesting, it ceases in the Indus Valley civilization, which is contemporaneous to the Minoan civilization. And suddenly it's like, what? Plumbing? What's that about? And of course it comes back, but Romans Greeks and later Romans started and it falls apart again. And then later on, 19th century. Let's take a look. You're going to think, well, so what do the houses look like? Well, let's take a look at this next image. You're like, oh, that's pretty great. Love the model. Yeah, except for the wooden part at the very top. This model of a house actually dates between 1700 to 1600 BCE. You know, wait, this is a real Minoan model of their own homes? Yeah. Oh, you're interested now. It's in the museum. Yeah, this is actually they made a model. So why do they have a model here? Maybe they're trying to sell this home. Like, hey, come. This is an example of the house that we have for sale. Here's another image of it. There is it from another angle. So yeah, it is from ancient times. You can see kind of what it looks like. So yeah, sorry. I think it's great. Um, let's take this down for a moment. You didn't expect me to show you a model made by the Minoans of their of their own houses. Um, we can actually, if you don't believe me, also, why don't you just go walk into a Minoan neighborhood? What happened is on Santorini, when Thera blew up, it covered a whole bunch of towns, including Akratoria. And so what happens is that you can, if you want to, because it's like Minoan Pompeii. You can actually walk amongst the Minoan homes and look for yourself what they look like with your own eyes. And you'll see, hey, look, Dr. Riefeldt's right. They are multi-room dwellings, and a large portion of them are living in two-story houses. Yeah, that's just the way things are. Although some of them have collapsed, they're trying to embrace them up because when they excavated them, because they were covered as a result of the eruption of Thera, because they were covered, it kind of held them together. And as soon as they uncovered them, they started going, and some, unfortunately, just kind of melted away because it was only the dirt that held them together. But there are other places too. We also know the configuration of Minoan cities because we do sound detection, ground detection. So what we do is we're able to take a look, echo projection, take a look what's underneath the soil, and we're able to look and see the configuration. So we don't always have to excavate a town. We could just roll it over and see what's underneath on the other side. And so we take a look and we realize, wow, uh, these houses, it looks to be that wealth is more equally distributed, not because we're just trying to create this consciousness of an ideal society where we all share in the wealth. I'm not trying to do that. I'm not doing any kind of revisionism here. I'm just, as an archaeologist, I'm looking at the material culture, and what I see, I realize, hey, these houses are close to the same shape. We're seeing in a lot of them items that are well made. And I think it's really cute because, the nicer homes have the big frescoes and so forth. Even the little ones have frescoes, sometimes not as well painted, but frescoes on their walls too. They're going, well, they can have it, we can have it too, which shows me that there's an equal appreciation for art. It's not just for the wealthy, it is for even the humble person. And I think this would be great. If you want to write a wonderful book of the Minoans, it'd be fun for you to go on and show the humble art of the commoners that there's so much of. And that would be fun because I think, it's not as well done, but there is truly a lot of heart into it. But you'll have to go to various museums to take a look at it. But I think that would be a great a coffee a table book to talk to guests about that. This is the humble art of the Minoans. Or you can have maybe the first part will have the fancy art and you go further, whatever. But I still think it's pretty impressive. Moving on. From what we have observed within the material culture. So I'm arguing from what we can actually see and quantify and qualify uh, for ourselves. We don't need to have written documents saying, hey, look, it looks like there's more of an equal distribution of wealth. What we do is we walk into their cities, we echo project, down below and take a look what's underneath, and we're able to analyze this, and we're able to see for ourselves, hey, look, it's pretty obvious. There's no agenda here. They just are living better across the way, all the way across. So much concentration of wealth. Of course, it's not much concentration of wealth, I should say, created a sense of social equality, a sense of social equality. I'm not saying they are all equal, not at all. But to a large degree, the sense of equality moved from class even into gender. What I mean by that is that a sense of equality, you're going to see in the various depictions that people from all kinds of walks and talks are doing different kinds of trades. There seems to be a fluidity there, but it's also including gender. So we are going to say, so we can observe from the artwork as well as the material culture, men and women appear to enjoy some of the same rights and privileges, which is and even in many cases the same occupations, as I mentioned with the merchant earlier, right, in Egypt, and only acting priestesses within a religious context where they were the dominant gender. That's the only kind of exception. But I think it's interesting. The exception would be religion where women dominated. And we see this in the various depictions. But as public functionaries and administrators, these women had the right to take on any occupation and trade that was available to men. So that the Minoan bureaucracy was roughly about 50-50, right? From what we can gather by depictions of women displayed in these capacities. And much like in Anatolia, Asia Minor, the Minoans were matrilinear, with kinship lines deriving from the mother rather than the father. By the way, these kinds of ideas continued on to the Eteocretans all the way to the 1st century BCE. So once again, there's a precedent there that goes along the way. And also, what I find is interesting is studying the history of ancient Crete. We see these precedents of women in positions of power, even further along, which I think is interesting. How further along? All the way to the Christian era. So we see women in leadership positions in the Aegean areas that were occupied by the Minoans. And what I mean by that, we find women who are not only priests, but we find them as sometimes presbyteros and episcopos. Interesting precedent there. So, I mean, this idea it continues on even into the Christian era. Ooh, we're learning way too much in this time. Okay. Let's hold back the horses there, right? Okay, let's go back to the Minoans,
What's
shall we?
presbytora?
Presbyteros, priest. That's what it means. So what happens here is that with this influx of wealth coming in from all over the Mediterranean, an efficient manner of managing these economic resources, wealth filtered down amongst, as I mentioned, commoners as well, giving rise to a more leisure class society. I think that's fascinating. With more time to spend on other activities other than work. In fact, according to many scholars, the Minoans were the first leisure society that is known, enjoying all sorts of extracurricular activities. They have enough when it comes to resources to enjoy life, and the art shows it. It reveals, once again, we take a look at the artwork of the Egyptians. It's lots of it is political. Lots about is about power. Sure, you have some beautiful common art of the Egyptians. I'm not denying that, but a lot of it is religious oriented, and a lot of it is connected to the upper classes. But here you're going to see this enjoyment of art and beauty that is you can see in the material culture connected to even the average person. that they have a piece of this, that they have the time to enjoy these kinds of things, that somebody who's living in a humble five room 2-story home, very humble, that they're not wealthy by Minoan standards, that they're going to have hire or maybe do themselves their own little frescoes and artwork because they want that on their wall too. I love it. I absolutely love it. Okay. So once again, it's just all about looking and having the attitude to look from an archaeological standpoint. Okay, so um, we see also in their great artwork, they engage in various kinds of sports to a degree that's unmatched until the Roman period. They love sports, well, the Greeks too, the Olympics, right? They enjoy sumptuous meals. They're maybe as bad as us. You know how we always take pictures of, hey, this is what I had to eat. The Minoans are all, hey, look what I had. It appears on a fresco wall there. And even depictions of them going on very long nature strolls. You know, I'm going to be showing you some of this stuff. So, again, isn't it good to see it as opposed to just say it? Seeing is believing. While much is lost concerning the Minoans, their artwork has survived, and brilliantly so. And here the Minoans surprise us again with a society producing art not for its utilitarian functions, like so many civilizations of the Mediterranean. For instance, the Egyptians created art to awe one into reverence, or the Persians to stir up political allegiance, or the Assyrians to produce fear against those who would revolt against them. But art was produced for its sheer aesthetics alone. The Minoans, indeed, once again, important in world civilization. If we're looking into legacies of the Minoans not only a leisure society, they produced art for art's sake, for the express beauty of it all, for its decorative effects, for the fact that it beautified a wall, a piece of pottery, or a woman's outfit. Why did you paint this? The Minoan would answer, because it's pretty. Because it's beautiful. But what was the symbolism behind it? I like it. Doesn't it look great? You know, and so there's a sense of symmetry. You take a look, even the fringes of the house sometimes have these beautiful little decorations and curlicues, and it's thinking, wow, they like it. It's beautiful. From Minoan palaces to the homes of commoners, room after room was covered in such artwork, sometimes covering entire walls from ceiling to floor. The Minoans had an eye for detail, highlighting, for instance, let's take a look at some Minoan art, shall we? Next image, yes. All right, here we go. Since there's a cat hunting a heathcock. Look at that. That's beautiful. I'm sorry, look at that. Wow. I'm sorry, just for a moment. Take a look at the colors, how vibrant they are, and the plants. Let's look at the next one. There's another cat. It looks like this cat is hunting. Look at that face. Look at that expression. And you can see over there, it looks like there's a heathcock. There's a bird, and you can see that face. I think it's about to leap. What do you think? That's. I've seen cats do that kind of poise. Oftentimes, all too often, the ears are popped up, and the face is already to pounce. Next image. Of course, they liked the octopus. This is from a vase here from 1500 BCE. Look at this. Look at the octopus. Okay, so it looks like an octopus, but it looks like it has like almost like not cartoonish, but it looks like it's looking at you, doesn't it? It's like, hi. Next image. How about playing monkeys? These are like leaping monkeys. You'll find in Minoan art lots of monkeys. So apparently monkeys were pets. Actually, we do know monkeys were pets because we find little monkey skeletons in various places. Let's go to the next image. There's even a selection of readily identifiable plants, such as lilies. You can see some lilies here, which is, of course, a Minoan word. Next image. Look at this. Wow. Now, didn't I say that the Minoans, many times it's about color, a flourish of style, but take a look and you can see that this these are indeed flowers. These are indeed lilies, but there's a sense of an abstract feel to it. Do you see it? There's kind of a strange, semi-idealistic, impressionistic feel to it. It's just all about a sense of vibrancy, a sense of beauty. This would be, if it was put and fixed up and made vibrant again, this would be beautiful as just any image today to be hung in your house. Wouldn't you be, fix this up? Next image. Of course, you have myrtles. Oh, you have the lotus. This is, of course, I love this phrase here. This is the oldest pictorial evidence of humanity's love of roses, a fragment of a fresco dating from the Bronze Age, painted by an artist working within the Minoan civilization in Crete. It was discovered by the British archaeologist Sir Arthur Evans, who began his excavations at Knossos in 1899. In this photo, you can see the roses at the top and bottom left. Did you guys know that it was the Minoans' first earliest documentation of just simply the love of roses, the sense of aesthetics, right? Next image. Of course, they have irises and crocuses and lotuses and palms. Look at this. Look how, again, somewhat idealized, uh, but you get the idea. Look at these. Look at the intricacies of uh, these particular flowers. Again, once again, so vibrant. This is just painted on a wall. You can see the stripe above. This goes around the entire, this would have went around the whole entire wall. And it feels like when you go inside your home that you're walking into a garden. They're taking nature and they're bringing it indoors. They're not just happy to have nature outside of their walls. They want to have nature inside of their walls too. Once again, there's this feeling of unity between nature and a humanity. Next image. Oh, of course, you got the palm tree. Again, there's this idealization of the palm. Okay, next image. And dolphins. I mean, you got to have dolphins. Once again, this is adorning somebody's wall. And you can see the decorative effects down below with the wheel design that goes all the way around and twirls and so forth. Aesthetics are important. You can see also there is a depiction of what's at the bottom of the sea. Take a look at that one fish that seems to have its little head stuck into the ground, apparently feeding there. Again, an eye for detail. And again, look at these dolphins. Look how they're designed. Look how the stripe that goes across their face and then moves into one single line that trails back. Next image. We got flying fish and everything here. Once again, this is an image of under the sea. Beautiful. Next image. Oh, I threw in another dolphin and it looks like some flying fish here. That's above. But beyond that, again, look at the aquatic vegetation. Uh, and you can see the design simply for design's sake on top. You can see that these designs above and below will move into Greek designs. See where the influence is. It's the Minoans that are influencing much of Greek aesthetics and the Greek enjoyment of luxury. It's not the Mycenaeans, that's for sure. It's the Minoans where the Greeks get this. Next image. Um, okay, this pot. Uh, Take a look. You got what looks like you got a octopus right there. And you also have look at all the little shells that are on the uh, uh, there are lying where you the hand grasp, excuse me. But you can see the various images there. This is very almost baroque in style. It's again pretty amazing. Next image, and we have a few. This is from Festos. So you had these large flowers that went around this banquet vessel. So these are lilies. And you can see again how they are very delicate, the way they move out. Next image. Oh, this one, you can see this one, I still love it. This one is as you can see, a tray with handles with whirling motifs. It's a serving plate. I think that's pretty cool. Next image. And here is this is a frying pan, a frying pan with spirals and decorative aspects, including fish. Next image. Oh, okay. So um, this we will. Well, how'd that get there? Let's we'll get there in a few moments. So let's take that down temporarily. We'll see that again. Don't worry. How you guys doing? Are you getting a taste of the Minoans? Right? Nothing better than seeing what they have, right, for themselves. They're common goods. Remember, uh, this is something. These are items that people see on an everyday basis, not just the wealthy, but also the humble. And you can see that they're very rich when it comes to their aesthetics. Beautiful, right? Um, so the focus of art, as you can see, a lot of it is on natural or decorative beauty or on leisurely events. Of course, you have also depictions of engaging in sports, putting on makeup, cooking, walking down the street. The Minoans, interestingly enough, didn't display great battle scenes or images of war, except for a couple exceptions moving into the Mycenaean era, which would happen. You don't see it. They're not interested in that. I find that alone, the lack thereof of those kinds of displays, very intriguing, because you see that in the Hittite culture on one side, the Egyptians to the south. We see this with the Middle Eastern, uh, Great East civilizations, but you don't see it with the Minoans. And again, that tells you something about life on Crete and the surrounding areas. That it does appear to be more peaceful that we see in an evidential sense. Well, at least the people themselves do not seem to be interested in it, right? The Minoans also had a sense, as you saw, of the abstract in their artwork, right? They exaggerated certain aspects and features to suit a more nuanced meaning. The objects didn't always have to look exactly like an object. It was intended to represent more of an idea or a storyline. While the Minoan cat may not always look as realistic as an Egyptian cat in art, the Minoans intended to give a meaning for this adjustment, reviewing the cat as being stealthier in the hunt or even cruel, as we saw, right? In fact, some of the art, beyond simply being abstract at times, were deliberately distorted. It was even impressionistic. Furthermore, the Minoans were able to handle clay and stone and bronze in ways exceeding the technical abilities of their neighbors, and at times even attempted pieces beyond their own skills. Nevertheless, They were determined to make the attempt, for the ideal often exceeded their ability to fully succeed. They are going to try anyway. In this way, they went through a stage in art that appears to be the equivalent of almost like a romanticism. Clearly, the Minoans were ahead of their time. And as I mentioned, the Minoans love their sports. Now we go to the next image, with the most popular being boxing. And there happens to be images of boxing. I just forgot to put them in here. But if you want to look up, Google, enter boxing, you'll see a whole bunch of people boxing, men as well as women are depicted as boxing. You also have right here bull jumping. Naturally, now what's interesting is that you see here there's a flipping there. So one person is literally taking the bull by the horns. So theoretically, it looks like the bull will be charging you. And then what you do is perhaps you race towards the bull and you flip over it onto the other side, perhaps landing on your feet. We don't know exactly how this operated, but there you had it. Depictions of people jumping over the bull are inclusive of both men as well as women. But before we go to the next image, I want you to look at the bottom design and the top design. And once again, this sense of abstract, this feel beautiful. Next image. And here's another image of a bull jumping. This is more sleek. It does look like, once again, a person does indeed flip over it. Bull jumping was, we have women, again, depicted as flipping over the bull as well as men. So it's both genders as well as boxing. Bull jumping was an extremely dangerous sport, with the bull charging, as I mentioned, headlong onto a line of jumpers. When the bull was upon them, each jumper grabbed the bull literally by the horns and vaulted over the beast in a somersault and attempted to land on their feet behind it. The fact that women were involved in such a dangerous sport demonstrates the differences in their gender perceptions. Many scholars have discussed the possibility that bull jumping was connected to sacred games, where the bull was sacrificed at the end, or even a bull cult. But to date, no evidence for this possibility has been found. For even the fixtures connected to a possible bull cult, for instance, the sacred symbol of bull horns and the double axe, or even a libation jug, are placed in correlation with this act. But we're still not sure. I think that's maybe the last image. Let's look at the next one just briefly. But I think, oh yeah, there we go. Okay, so there we have. There's a bull right there, as you can see there, with the double axes right there. So, and that's one of the libation jars. So women are often shown as throwing spears, some suggesting that there are some background association with the Amazons. As for clothing, next image. Well, for men, okay, as represented in the artwork, Minoan men appear to be wearing very little. This person is wearing a little bit more, but let's go to the next one. Oftentimes they're shown as wearing a loin cloth, but other times something that resembles a kilt. Next image. So these are Minoan men. So the tradition is Minoan men typically are bare chested. You can see, taking a look here, they are very much in servitude here. They have their long hair and holding these beautiful vases. But again, you can see that I guess it's hot in Crete. I'm hoping that they will burn. Next image. Meanwhile, women. This is a great image because this is Minoan maiden with prayer beads. This is a fresco, so there seems to be this connection with sacred beads. and it most likely is a prayer bead. We know that these traditions go back to Crete, and that we do have prayer beads that go back into ancient times. And they were used for magical associations. And these prayer beads were sometimes used for magical expressions connected to various goddesses. And this is later on connected to the development of what's known as the Ephesian letters, which were also connected to beads that were connected to Ephesus. But the earliest instances of them happens to be from the Aegean area, including Crete and a few other places. So it's very interesting, this early depiction. We'll take a look at what she's wearing again. But she does have a jacket. You know, she does have something around her shoulders, but of course the breast is exposed. Look at the hair. Well, you know, in those curls, once again, hoop earrings, and look how elaborate that dress is, right? So next image. So meanwhile, this is a pretty obvious one here. It was women for a procession at Akrotiri right here. Meanwhile, women often wore short sleeve robes, layered skirts, or strapless fitted bodices. Next image. One unusual feature of these robes and female outfits in general is the fact that they often expose both the navel and the breast. Some scholars say this exposure was only during ceremonial occasions, which of course is ridiculous since the Minoans depict women wearing this kind of clothing within non religious, leisurely contexts. As for the patterns of the clothing, both symmetrical geometrical designs, bold symmetrical geometrical designs seem to dominate. After viewing enough Minoan artwork, which you have done now, one begins to get the idea that a tiny waist was prized in Minoan culture, but not just for women though, but for men as well. Men have to have like real tiny, and maybe this is just what they have as far as the symbolism behind the images. And we see also both genders wore tight metal belts that help define their waists. Maybe that's why they look defined because they're wearing these belts to define it. You take a look at how much food the Minoans are consuming. I don't think that this is terribly always a realistic image. On average, next image. Oh, this is another good image. Look at these. Wow, it's amazing. What's amazing is again, they're like they're billowy kind of pants. So they're not full skirts. They have a way for you to kind of walk around. So it's kind of, so it's kind of a combination there. Next image. On average, both men and women wore their hair long, with women having their long hair dressed up in elaborate fashion locks and waves and plaits, or in a simple ponytail hanging high, revealing the nape of the neck. Next image. Uh, most Minoans wore necklaces of some kind, usually of beautiful colored stones, but they could be, as elaborate as beads made of amethyst and lapis lazuli and agate and cornelian and rock crystal, or and so forth and so on. As for security, next image. For the most part, throughout the Minoan civilization, their cities lacked defensive works, great walls protecting their towns and cities, or strategic forts to guard against possible invasion, at least until the last century, when more insecure times arrived, are not within the material culture. You have beautiful towns like this one. By the way, you're looking at this, and some of the buildings that appear in just this way are still standing as a result of the volcanic eruption being preserved. Let's take a look at me for a little bit here. So here you got it. So at least until the last century, you've got no walls. I mean, this tells you something. If a society is worried about war worried about invasion, they're going to build walls around their cities. The fact that there are none until a later period of time, when you do have the Mycenaeans move on the move, then of course walls do appear. But it tells you again in congruence with the fact that the images that they display are not wartime, does seem to indicate that the Minoans are more peaceful until we get into the 1500s, 1400s BCE. Then we see defensive walls coming up. So not saying there's no walls, but earlier on, no, there is no walls. And again, this tells you so much. Um, so let's go on. Okay, so there's no walls. When we do finally, as I said, see them, these fortifications are far smaller on scale. So this means for the greater part of the history of the Minoans, they were not in constant threat of war. They were secure in themselves. And as we can see from their artwork, war was not that interesting of a topic because of this fact. It was not as relevant. But after gaining as much perspective of Minoan life and habits, it gets down to the question of what makes up the Minoan religion. What did the Minoans believe in? What did they worship day in and day out? How did that religion embrace so much of who they were in other parts of life? We may again claim to be doing guesswork because of a lack of written records. Are you seeing that that's not as relevant as before? But that would really be far from the case, since we have discovered their places of worship, their sacred tools, the depictions of their religious practices in their artwork, and the images of their very deities themselves, which tells you much through their iconography, especially when we cross-reference it with other relevant objects that we can recognize. There's just so much that we can know as opposed to cannot know. I'll be right up in front and say that Minoan beliefs are very much centered on female deities. That becomes very obvious, but don't worry, I'm going to prove it to you. So, nothing to fear. Dr. Rietveld is here. So, how can we know? Well, we have unearthed so many of these female images and so little of male images that it becomes fairly obvious after a while. Also, again, in their artwork, male deities are very much underrepresented as male priests are shown as officiating various religious rites. They are, but not that often. In fact, hardly any images of male deities have been discovered. References via later documents are from the Mycenaeans. We do know that there were male deities. We'll talk about those in a little bit. Don't worry, there are there. But some of the exceptions, we're talking about the exceptions right now, include smaller male figures shown besides larger in size female figures. Let's take a look at one right now. Okay, so here you go. So you can see here, there's the female figure at the center, right? And then you have right here a male figure holding a branch as an offering. Clearly, he is not in a power position there. I like the building with the three columns. I'm not sure this could be a sanctuary. There's a flowering, giant fennel branches that are there. There's an inscription. And it says right here, name of the woman, possibly on the right. Another building with columns on the other side, maybe a sanctuary. And a female figure leaning, maybe she, I like how it says, what do you think? Do you think she's sleeping? Do you think she's crying? If you take a look at the detail inside of the temple that she's laying on, it looks like there's some images there. But clearly, she is. This is a female figure. I believe it is a goddess, and she is clearly in a very strong position. Next image. Oh, okay. So we'll come back to this one in a little bit. So good. So, um, so some people assume that the male images represent a vegetative god. And you can see why they think so just by looking at that last image. But it can also represent a male worshiper. It may be no mere coincidence that society and their views of women reflected back into their religious beliefs. And their heightened reverence for goddesses also heightened the importance of women in their society, giving them a greater latitude of rights that were on par, often, as we have seen, with men in representation. In a sense, there is, in a sense, a gender equality, which is certainly rare of any society during any age, let alone the ancient world. Like the majority of the ancient world at the time, the Minoans were polytheistic, and we can recognize a number of other deities. Once again, the majority of these deities of the Minoan pantheon were goddesses. And some scholars suppose that they all represent the many faces of one all powerful goddess pervading the universal order. Yet these conceptions of the many representing the one beyond, well, certainly uh, possible, are a little early on the world stage, possibly, when it comes to theological conceptions. That there is more than one is plain to see from this side by side goddesses discovered, for example, at Gazi, with one of them having poppies in her hair, while the other one colt horns and birds on her head. Still, I would argue that there appears to be some kind of great goddess above the others that certainly dominated the Minoan pantheon in much the same way as Zeus dominates the Olympian pantheon of the Greeks. The echoes of this great Cretan goddess is to be readily found along the shores of Asia Minor, from the Ionian and Carian coastline to the Lycian and Pamphylian coastlines. Ancient religious traditions refer to a great goddess who is sometimes connected with the Isle of Crete. It's difficult to assess the nature of this mother goddess of Crete, but of course, we certainly are going to try. Now we get to the next image. The the Magna Mater goddess name is Potnus. Potnus meaning the lady. That is often in various tablets. She does have shrines. This Potnus, this lady, has shrines and sanctuaries in many places. Um, she is worshipped on the Isles, on Crete, of course, on the surrounding Aegean islands, and sometimes, of course, on the mainland as well. At Knossos, there are dedications of offerings to the Lady of the Labyrinth. Potnia occurs repeatedly as the main goddess's name, as the lady. Later on in the classical period, the title was used as a respectful, honorific title in addressing women of high rank, but it originated as the proper name for the principal Minoan goddess. In her aspect, as let's look at me for a little bit. You can see here Potnia right there. It's pretty cool. In her aspect as a domestic goddess, she was the guardian of households. She was also the guardian of cities. So Potnia did survive. She transformed into Athena. Potnia transformed into Rhea. She transformed into Hera, right? She transformed into aspects of Artemis. So you're going to see that this echoes of this great goddess will appear as different faces of goddesses later on. Is there there is one occurrence at Knossos of the name Potnia in conjunction with the epithet Atana. The incomplete tablet has been reassembled from fragments and gives a list of dedications, including offerings to the god Poseidon and Pauwan, who is an earlier forerunner of Apollo. The dedication of Atana Potinia on the same tablet unfortunately breaks off during this momentous invocation. The meaning of the epithet Atana is not known, but it suggests that the Minoan goddess was already being addressed amongst things as Lady Athena. So that the word Athena has basically, as a form, seems to be pre-Greek and may even be connected to a place name. So Lady Atana may be connected to lady of a place called Atana that eventually becomes attributed or connected to a goddess by that name. Of course, in classical times, Athena became the warrior queen of her city on the mainland, Athens. And maybe some scholars have said that Lady Atana is connected to that city. And so the city of Athens, the goddess is Athena after all. And so they're referring to Athens when they're talking about that. Isn't that fun? Sorry, just throw in some fun trivia there. We move on. Let's talk about the double X. Let's go to the next image. You can see here connected to double X was probably Potnia's symbol, and possibly the pillar and the snake were her symbols too. Let's take a look at some images of the double X right there. There's another one you can see. Yeah, maybe she's connected, right, to the goddess, right? You can see they're doing offerings there before the double X, right? And one seems to be bowing down before it. And you see a vessel down below. Perhaps she's pouring something into before the axes. Next image. You can see there is the goddess. And what does she have on her? Well, she has the double axe. And you have also, she's reaching out for a puppies. This is a goddess kind of figure. And you see above her representations of the sun as well as the half moon. Next image. And of course, the double axes are to be found in a museum. You can see these are pretty large. And you also notice they're not unlike the axes that we saw a few pictures back where offerings were being given. Good. I love that. Okay, you can take those down. The snake, of course, living in crevices near the hearth, was made a natural symbol for the earth-dwelling earth mother, right? The house snake cult survived into modern times. And the snake was sometimes known as the master of the house or the house mother. So the snake is connected to that. Interesting. You also have one tablet from Knossos that refers to an offering of honey dedicated to Da Purito Yo Potnia, meaning the lady Potnia of the labyrinth. This tells us that the Potnia had a sanctuary dedicated to her in some part of the labyrinth at Knossos. Since this temple, and only this one, was referred to in antiquity as the labyrinth, at least as far as Crete was concerned, so that we can. So, what I think is interesting. So, we do have a labyrinth. Of course, you're still already thinking of King Minos and so forth, right? We can fairly be sure that there were sanctuaries dedicated to Potnia in other major temples as well, at Kydonia, Phaistos, Malia, and Zakros. Now, since the goddess herself was not permitted to die, the annual birth and death seem to be connected to a young male year spirit. Next image. This is a small, inferior kind of deity who took the role as a son, possibly a consort, kind of this boy god, representing the important principle of the discontinuity of nature. In the end, he still remained subordinate, we see through various images and iconography, to the goddess, which we'll see a whole bunch more. Don't worry. At the end of the game, however, which is interesting, when we study the Crete in later times, and these are still the Minoans, but they're going into the era when things start getting written down. It turns out that this young male year spirit will be connected to a god by the name of Zeus, which throws you off. So what happens is that we do have an original Minoan name for him before the Indo-European name crosses over to him. Let's take a look. I have an image, a later on image of this god who becomes Zeus in the next image. So let's take a look at this. There we go. So the Minoan name is Velkanos, and the name Velkanos endured into the classical period, and it is one of the titles Velkanos will be then attributed to, connected to Zeus. And so when we get to the time of writing, we have the Cretans worshiping a Zeus Velkanos. However, on Crete, even when we get to the time of literature, it's interesting that Zeus Velkanos is also known as the Koros. He is known still at this time in the classical age as the boy. So once again, we can read back on this one. Velkanos was always subject to this goddess, and was always shown in positions of adoring her. There are ivory statues dedicated to that are of the divine boy. We see various figurines there. I do find it interesting, and I'll bring this up, that at Ephesus, we see the same kind of images early on in Ephesus. There seems to be a boy, a Koros, that has some connection with Zeus. So this idea from the Minoans does leap into Ephesian context, especially around Mount Pion. Again, fascinating. So we can take these stories that are around during the classical age and of course, early to the archaic age, and you can draw them back forth, because there's no reason otherwise why you'd have Zeus as a boy with a Minoan name. And of course, the various depictions of this deity in these kinds of positions of adoration. Okay, so let's go to, I think that's it for that part. Thank you. While goddesses appear to be predominant in Minoan religion, and of course there are exceptions, as you know, beyond Zeus, Velkanos, Poseidon not only appears to be one of them, but the most important of the male deities for the Minoans. Now, Poseidon, while he was understood as the god of the sea by the archaic era of Greece, we know from the Minoans and the Mycenaean sources that he was actually worshipped as one powerful deity with three aspects. So Poseidon was one deity with three aspects: that of the sky, that of the earth, inclusive of the sea, and that of the underworld. As the chthonic god, the god of the underworld, he used the epithet which survives to the later era as Enosichthon. basically the earth shaker, which, by the way, the word earth shaker, right? The word enosikthon, right? In Greek, we actually find this in linear B, Mycenaean linear B, as e nise deone. So the earth shaker word is already connected to Poseidon all the way back to the time of the Mycenaeans. Um, so we look at the iconography of Poseidon from the time of the Minoans in tablets and and other images. Especially, we see it more prevalent. However, actually, we don't see it hardly at all during the time of the Minoans. We see that there are derivatives of this idea that we know that Poseidon is existing under the Minoans, but even the word Poseidon itself has Indo-European roots. So we do know the name in and of itself, even though it goes back to the Minoans, the name is still very Mycenaean. So, which again is interesting. But we see that Poseidon appears to be in three aspects. Also, we get to the Mycenaeans later on, that of the role of the heavens, the earth, and the underworld. Um, but what will happen? In fact, we have some other connections too, that it appears that occasionally he is also connected to, well, he is connected to bulls. He's also connected in many cases to the sun, so that he is the bull god, but he is also the sun god, but he's also the earth shaker. So the sun god would be the heavens, the bull god would be the earth, and the earth shaker would be the underworld. This is Poseidon. So let's take a look at the next image. So the tripartite division aspects of Poseidon also may be reflected in the tripart divisions of many of the Minoan temples. We take a look at the Minoan temples and we realize, I guess you're looking at it right here. You have, of course, the shrine's form has a raised central cella with two flanking cellae, right? And of course symbolizes the three realms of the cosmos. And you can see here the three cellae, the three temples represent the underworld, red, the earth, yellow ochre, and the heavens, blue. And you can see this right here in this imagery, next image. And so you're going to see this in many of the temples, this idea of tripartite in form. Now this, one of the most interesting possible images of Poseidon arrives from a clay seal discovered at Kydonia. It depicts a god with a prominent staff in hand standing upon a tower that could be a temple at the edge of a cityscape. Let's take a look at another image that really makes it pop. Waves are either, next image, waves, yeah, good. Waves are either crashing against or proceeding from the lower part of the tower. Some have interpreted this lower part as the city gates, but there is definitely something that resembles a rock formation of some kind. The waves are often thought to connect with Poseidon in his capacity as god of the sea, although, as some people believe, the image of the waves may actually represent the tsunami or tidal wave generated by the Great Thera eruption. In the sky, in the background behind him, is the image of a bull on one side and the image of the fish on the other, connecting to his aspect of both God of the sea and the earth. The fact that he is depicted in the sky already assumes his position as a sky god. And so there seems to be something going on here. It's fascinating that Poseidon, who is god of the earth, which inclusive of the sea, the sky, and the underworld, after the period of time of the Minoans and Mycenaeans, he gets relegated to just the sea. with Zeus gaining the sky and Hades gaining the underworld. I still find this very, very interesting, very noteworthy. Okay. Okay, so let's look at me for a little bit there. Of course, the fact that Poseidon was connected to the bull within a Minoan context has interesting ramifications in regards to the sacred sport of bull jumping. Uh, a well-known writer by the name of Castledon remarks that parallels between Minoan bull leaping and Spanish bullfighting, for instance, should not deceive us into seeing bull leaping as mere theater of chorality as far as entertainment. It was not a game, but a serious and central ritual in the Minoan belief system. The bull was a manifestation of Poseidon, and dancing with the most powerful god of the Minoan pantheon was no light matter. Probably the bull dance expressed the interweaving of human and divine destinies. There were elements of collusion and elements of struggle with this deity. Probably the rite was an ordeal, one of many rites of passage that young Minoans, girls as well as boys, had to undergo in order to achieve a higher status, unquote. Now, a remnant of one Minoan story related to Poseidon and the bull may be found in the story of Pasiphae, who mates with the white bull and so gives birth to the Minotaur, right? We see this in Pseudo Apollodorus. One of the most popular Minoan goddesses appears to be what is known as the Lady of Beasts. Next image. Who is very much a proto-Artemis in many ways, depicted as communing close with nature and as a mistress of the animal kingdom. Some seal images display this huntress goddess with a spear in her hand and accompanied by a lion. A next image, although it must be noted that sometimes she is holding a sword instead of a spear. Of course, even the Greeks at first believed that Artemis and Apollo originated from Asia Minor, the very place where the Minoans came from before they settled Crete, and only later readapted the legend to appease their patriotic sensibilities by suggesting locations closer to mainland Greece, like the island of Ortygia. Yet in Ephesus, on the shores of Asia Minor, locals from all around still venerated a sacred garden that was also called Ortygia, where it was believed Leto gave birth to the twins Artemis and Apollo. Additionally, those in Lycia believed the place known as the Latoon was where Leto gave birth to the twins. So seeing a connection of the Lady of Beasts with Artemis is not impossible. Next image. And you can see here, once again, the changes in iconography. Next image. Also, this Lady of Beast is depicted as standing by or on a mountain. So she arrives in the form of a mountain mother goddess. Once again, Artemis in Asia Minor was also connected to a great mountain maiden or mountain goddess via her association with Cybele. In Ephesus, Artemis of the Ephesians is likewise connected to holy mountains via an earlier connection with Cybele. In fact, it may be fair to say that Cybele in Asia Minor is just another name for the goddess who appears in Crete and who eventually becomes known as Artemis. Many scholars also believe Hera, the wife of Zeus himself, may ultimately derive from either Asia Minor or Crete and was associated with the Minoans. Next image. The Minoans also appear to venerate what is labeled by scholars as the snake goddess, with snakes entwined on her body or in her hands. Because of the fact that this image is primarily found within domestic settings, often within small household shrines, this goddess has acted as a guardian deity or spirit of the household. Two snake goddesses were discovered even in the palace of Knossos, with one of them having a snake on her headdress, while the other has that of a panther. Although how these were put together happens to be a matter of controversy. And so some of the recreations are questionable. But still, it does represent this goddess. It is a very provocative image, but its restoration and interpretation has become problematic. Yet the snake goddess is not the only image we find within various houses, for a representation of a small bird is sometimes found in these domestic shrines also. Goddesses are also found on various clay seals, often accompanied with griffins and lions, the later very characteristic of the goddess Kybele in Asia Minor. Next image. One of the most common representations of the Minoan goddess shows her sitting on a throne beneath a sacred tree. Next image. Other seals and rings depict the same goddess looking over her worshippers from her throne, many of them holding gifts to be dedicated to her. And let's take a look at a few of these. Look at this. Look at how beautiful you have here. The goddess definitely at her throne. And you can see the offering here, the lady on the far left, right? She seems to be feeding the flames. It appears to be a monkey here. What do you think? Is it a monkey? And what is that beautiful bird or some kind of spirit that happens to be behind this goddess? This is very impressive. Next image. Let's get a close up of her. I guess it doesn't get any closer than that, but there you have it. Once again, so colorful. Next image. This is interesting. You have here is a procession of basically spirits like jinn that are approaching the goddess. I love that. Next image. You do have frequently these scenes are accented by the image of the sun. You can see right here, and the moon and the stars above. Sometimes even the planet of Venus. You can see here there is a male deity who is before a goddess on a throne, and you can see the sun above. Next image. Here is yet another image of a deity, female deity on the throne, and another male image that is before her. Once again, she appears to be in a position of power, does she not? Next image. And here is, love this image here. This image here, you can see there is the goddess. She's not on the throne, but she's sitting beneath a tree. Maybe she's connected with the tree. You can see behind her, there seems to be some kind of floating object, somebody collecting the fruit. Possibly, I'm thinking grapes, picking the grapes there. So connected to plenitude. She's also, look at that, she's holding opium. So many people will say that these images are influenced by the taking in of opium to, in a sense, go through this magical, wonderful trip. You can see the double X there. And you can see the sun and the moon above, various offerings. You see also another sprite-like being in the upper right. Take a look at these various decorations in the far right. Are those faces? I mean, this is, again, these are amazing images and tells you much about Minoan civilization. We don't need to have words to be able to understand the reverence for nature in this image and almost this feeling of animism. Next image. Here, you take a look, and it looks like you have dancers. One of the most prominent aspects of Minoan beliefs was their belief in appearances of a goddess while they performed their dance. And look, you have the dancers there, and perhaps this is the goddess that is appearing before them. A gold ring discovered at Isopata depicts four women with arms raised, dancing amidst blooming flowers. Above the dancing women, a small figure of a female wearing different attire kind of floats in the air. You see here? In another ring from Pylos, a small figure is shown as flying down to a mountain peak. A third ring from Mycenae has a procession of women heading towards a woman that's sitting on the throne below a tree. Let's go to the next image. I think these are some of the images ahead. Look at this. Whoa, right? This is a different one, right? You can see here you have a sanctuary that's on top of a hill. Uh, so, next image. We discovered a plate in the ruins of the first palace at Phaistos. It shows a dancing female figures on either side of another female figure who emerges directly out of the earth. She does appear very much like a snake with no arms or legs and markings appearing to be scales, although they could also represent some kind of vegetation just as easily. This chthonic female looks directly as a stylized flower. Is this an early representation of Persephone, who was connected with both picking flowers and the underworld? Next image. And then you have, of course, what is often called the poppy goddess. One of the most popular of these images was discovered at Ghazi in 1959. With arms raised, either in blessing or ecstasy, this goddess image is about 79 inches in height and has three movable poppies that are projecting from her head. In 1967, Kritokos and Padaki identified these poppies as used specifically by the ancients for opium. The colors in vertical notches in the poppies, let's go to the next image, directly correspond with the color of the juice from the poppy as well. In nature, these notches appear right at the end of the flowering period when they are ripe and ready to be cultivated. You can see they're ripe there. According to ancient custom, the opium bulb is then left in the sun to dry, forcing the opium juice to ooze to the surface. They then collected this liquid with a spoon and was then often mixed with wheat to create opium cakes. A gold signet ring discovered at Mycenae that mimics Minoan designs depict a goddess sitting under a sacred tree with priestesses worshiping her, and she carries precisely three poppies in her hand. Most scholars believe that opium was used to induce a meditative and even ecstatic state for worshippers, at least the priestesses. Poppies were also often connected with relaxation and even sleep. So maybe that one goddess that is laying down on top of the temple or priestess, perhaps she's sleepy because she had, maybe too much opium. I don't know. The Ghazi poppy goddess appears to have her eyes closed, as you can see here, as if sleeping. This tradition was carried on into the Demeter worship, where she is also shown. Demeter is also shown as carrying poppies in her hand. Of course, Nyx, the god of night and sleep, and Thanatos, the god of death, was also wreathed in poppies. So there is quite a bit to this. Next image. There we go. Oh, there's an image of holding the poppies as we mentioned before. Good, good. Next image. Okay, beyond worshiping images in anthropomorphic form, the Minoans believed that the entire natural world was filled with a divine aspect. And like many of the other contemporary civilizations, they did worship before trees, sacred stones, pillars, and springs in connection to these spirits. The Minoans worshiped at locations considered sacred. They worshiped on mountain peaks. They worshiped in caves and around certain trees, at springs and rivers, and about stones, right? So there you have it. Um, so all about Next image, all about the mountain peaks of Crete. Oh, look at this. Well, actually, this is a great image. We're not the mountain peaks yet, but you can see here there is a sacred shrine. You can see that it is kind of based on top of this foundation, and you have priests and or goddesses on each side. That's pretty impressive. Next image. I do like that we're talking about mountain peaks being sacred. And I do want you to recognize this mountain peak, and there is a temple at the very top. I also want you to look at and see this cool boat down below with the oarsmen. And you see on one side, you see it looks like walls and somebody that is shaking a tree. And on the other side, you see a goddess perhaps sitting on a throne. Uh, it's a beautiful configuration. And this, of course, is a ring. Okay. Next image. Here's an image again, perhaps priestesses with flowers going to a temple. We learn a lot about the architecture. Look at the bull horns on top of this temple. Many of the Minoan temples have these, what looks like bull horns. Next image. This is a place called Petsophis on Crete. This is a recreation of one of these mountain top places. So you can see this. I have a few pictures of this. They have recreated it. So they have mountain shrines. And if you want to talk to the gods of the sky, you got to go on top of a mountain to do so. So here we are. Look at the next image. There we go. And there's a representation of it right there. Of course, on the left, you see the recreation. On the right, you can see the tripartite shrine, what it used to look like at one time. Next image. You got a close up there. It's pretty impressive, right? So this is what a mountaintop Minoan shrine used to look like. You see those rams there. You see all the curly cues, right? All the spirals at the door portal there. Typical Minoan fashion. Next image. And if you don't have the whole idea, here is a drawing recreation of the temple that you just saw. Um, absolutely, absolutely beautiful. Um, so what happens is that the Minoans do portray great celebrations that are set upon the mountain peaks. Archaeologists have discovered that goats were the most common sacrifices, the most common sacrificial animals upon these mountain peaks, discovering their bones at various altar sites located in these higher elevated areas. They have also detected that great fires were lighted at night, as we know from various lamps discovered at the site for the sacrificial rites, and that they threw in various earthen figures into the flames along with the animal bones. Next image. Actually, in these very same peak sanctuaries, archaeologists have discovered clay representations of various human limbs and other body parts, possibly associated with some sort of healing cult. But this cult connected to the parts of the human body was not only evident upon the mountain peaks, but at the temple of Arcanis. They discovered a pair of life-size clay feet. Furthermore, bronze locks of hair were found at Knossos, with some archaeologists theorizing that they originally came from some kind of wooden image, but some body parts. Next image. Minoan art, this is great, right? You're really getting the view here. Minoan art often shows worshipers dancing around sacred trees. The sacred stones, also called betlos, were often shaped like columns and are found at the entrances of various sanctuaries. Upon seals and frescoes, these stones are depicted as floating in the air. Let's take a look at, first of all, so take a look. You're going to see floating betel stones, right? You're going to see them. And you're also going to see people shaking trees. It does look like that there is some kind of ecstatic dance going on, you know, maybe it's the poppies, right? Next image. Just take a look at some of these images. Look at this one, right? Once again, You have the theme of sleeping and the theme of shaking a tree, and of course, what looks like a goddess in the middle. Once again, of course, typical with Minoan clothes. Notice the dress, right? Next image. Wow, this is even more abstract. What I think is interesting about this one is you have this floating goddess on the right, but you do have a prominent male figure at the center. It looks like on the left-hand side, again, the shaking of trees. Next image. This is fascinating. Is she holding a bow and arrow? And is it facing the male figure who seems to possibly be stopping her? Who knows? Once again, you're seeing a bent tree and a very some interesting other things that are going on. So again, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So you could see a lot of interesting activity going on here, but there is some dancing. Next image. Once again, wow, look at this great shaking of trees, floating objects. Do you think possibly after looking at these images that maybe shaking a tree was a ritual for the Minoans? Now, why I'm saying this is I think that many people today who say, well, you know what? We need to have something written down that says, hey, the Minoans performed a ceremony where they shook trees. When you could take a look at the artwork, and there's so much, and I'm not showing you even half of it, of ritual uh, uh, context, religious context, and you can see there is definitely shaking of trees. So I don't think we have to have something written down to understand that this is part of it, right? But the question is we want to know more. Is the shaking of tree connected to releasing some kind of energy, some kind of magic in some way? Is it connected to veneration? What is it? Is it, or are they in the thralls of ecstasy? And as they're in this moment, they're shaking the trees. Or is it the sense of unity with the natural forces? I don't know. But take a look, and you can see there's evidence still of this ritual. The question is, what are the deeper meanings of it? And once again, looking at sleeping. So when people say, I think they're crying, I'm thinking, it's sleepy. What do you think? We've seen enough of these images. Let's keep going. Okay. Here, of course, you have a bird that's kind of swooping down, and you got a tree that's bending, but we're not sure what else is going on here. It looks like a male figure in this one, but there is some sense of connection with nature, with the bird, with the tree, and something else flying above. Next image. Okay, I'm liking this one. This one, you have the flying Beetlos. These are the sacred stones. Look at these sacred stones. They are just flying around. There's a big one floating in the air in the center. They're floating around like insects above. Again, you can see that there seems to be the whirling of ecstasy here, right? Are you seeing it? Next image. Okay, so we take a look at this. Okay, so we got enough when it comes to shaking trees. Um, and we do see these rough floating stones, but then we see some images that are, how do I say this? Kind of disturbing, not too disturbing. The Minoan spiritual universe was inhabited by spirit beings that are difficult to define. Well, sometimes they look human with hands and feet, sometimes of lions. In other cases, they don't look human at all. Case in point, this. Here you have what appears to be a goddess sitting down, and then you have, what is this in the middle? What is going on here? Some kind of really interesting spirit being. Next image. And of course, you have some others floating around. Um, In fact, you have actually various composite creatures having characteristics of many different kinds of living beings. Sometimes a creature has a human head, um, but a animal body. Sometimes it has a bull-like head shape and a human body, which kind of reminds me of the Minotaur, right? In some cases, they are monstrous in appearance, suggesting possibly evil spirits or demons. But we are really uncertain. Like this, what is this in the middle? Next image. Okay, so you do have these different kinds of images here. Let's take this one down because this is going to Elathria, right? So, as I said before, the majority of those uh, depicted officiated religious ceremonies in Minoan art are that they're women, right? See how easy that was? I just had to show you, like, 30 images or more to show, hey, with a few exceptions, and I noted those exceptions, it looks like maybe women are the ones who officiate the religion. Are you seeing how easy this is after a while? Remember, I haven't even shown you even a small amount of these images. There's so many beyond quantitatively, okay? So they do appear as a dominant force of Minoan religion that was likewise dominated by goddesses. Do you see that too? Devotees are portrayed as approaching the goddesses with their right arm raised up into the air or touching their forehead, while the goddesses themselves are shown as raising both of their arms high into the air with open palms facing outward in the act of receiving their worship. So I hope this helps, right? I could show you more, but time is lacking. But I want you to understand this is just the tip of the iceberg. This is how we can know certain things, evidentially. Let's go to the next image that we already talked about. But one of the Minoan goddesses that managed to survive by name was deemed as acceptable to the ancient Greeks via the cult of Eleusis, and her name is Eileithyia. The Demeter cult at Eleusis it was ancient indeed, and even the name Eleusis itself is pre-Greek, meaning that it dates even earlier than the Mycenaeans, going back to the time of the Minoans. The word Eleusis is connected to the word Elysium. Let's go to the next image. The place where the righteous deceased go to the underworld. Oh, I've seen these other images. These are really pretty. Let's go to the next image. These early images that could be connected to Elathia. Okay, so the word Eleusis is connected to the word Elysium, and the place where the righteous deceased go into the underworld to live their lives in bliss and tranquility. The idea that the initiates of Eleusis believe that through her mysteries they would enter into a beautiful paradise after death makes sense. And so, of course, they would go to Elysium. Maybe also there's a connection to the town of the same name then. The ancients derive her name from the verb Uluthin, according to which it would signify the coming or helping goddess. Her name means then she who comes to aid or to relieve. Even more interesting is the possible fact that the word Eleusis, connects to the Minoan goddess Elathia, which is, by the way, a Minoan word. The story told at Eleusis follows that next image, that when Demeter had enough of her wanderings looking for her lost daughter Persephone, who was kidnapped by Hades, she took the form of an old Cretan woman, and she sat beside a well where Eleusis would someday be located, and she began to cry. Her tears brought four daughters of the chieftain Celsus out of the house, and they proceeded to comfort her. Demeter then spins a pathetic yarn to gain their sympathy, telling about how she was abducted by pirates and barely escaped. Of course, this is not simply an arbitrary story. While Demeter as the old Cretan woman is spinning a tale, there's much truth in it historically. First of all, Demeter clarifies that she is from Crete, of which we have already confirmed through discussing the evidence regarding the Minoans. Second, she tells how pirates brought her to Attica, which again makes historical sense, for the Mycenaeans who took over from the Minoans were indeed considered pirates by many and did arrive at Eleusis and other places, bringing their practices with them, regardless if they borrowed them from the Minoans. The third clue is her name. She calls herself Doso, which means I will give, which is close to eleutho, meaning to bring. That connects, of course, to the Minoan goddess Aletheia. Her name, of course, meaning the bringer, as brought up before, and connected to, of course, Eleusis. Concerning her origins, R.F. Willits writes the links between Aletheia, an earlier Minoan goddess, and a still earlier Neolithic prototype are relatively firm. The continuity of her cult depends upon the unchanging concept of her function. Aletheia was the goddess of childbirth and the divine helper of women in labor, and has an obvious origin in the human midwife. The Minoan goddess of caves, next image here, is also something that is important. Okay, so here is, of course, an image of Crete. Let's go to the next image. So Aletheia is connected to, of course, a sacred cave. Um, in fact, a one Mycenaean linear bead tablet discovered at Knossos specifically mentions that a goddess by the name of Aletheia was worshipped at a place called Amnessos, where this cave was located, which you're looking at here. For example, linear bead tablet for Knossos, known as KNGG 705, states, Amnessos, one jar of honey to Aletheia, one jar of honey to all the gods. This particular tablet was one of the keys that helped Michael Ventris decipher linear B, by the way. Perhaps he had help from the goddess, right? After all, he was birthing, understanding this language. Furthermore, she is mentioned as receiving offerings of wool. It strikes me that honey and wool are offerings that women would give. Of course, obviously, you have the tending of bees, which were considered sacred to several goddesses, and of course, the spinning of wool. Women did not usually work in the fields, and they worked in more in these areas. So I find that fascinating. Furthermore, the work known as the Odyssey refers to a cult located at the cave near Amnessos that was the birthplace of Aletheia. The Odyssey says he, Odysseus, anchored at Amnessos in Crete by the cave of Aletheia. Pausanias in the 2nd century CE reveals the Cretans still believe this tradition as well as others. He says the Cretans suppose that Aletheia was born at Amnessos at the Cnosian territory. So this cave is believed to be the birthplace or connected to Aletheia. In the late, next image, in the late post-Minoan period, the Aletheian sanctuary at Amnessos was famous enough for Homer to be able to refer to it. He actually expected his readers on the Greek mainland to know about it. So there it is. What happens here is this particular cave. You can see here, next image. It's about the sacred cave of Aletheia at Amnessos is probably also visited by urban as well as uh, other Minoans in the countryside. It was about 5 kilometers, away from Knossos. Cave mouth is hidden behind a fig tree, which we just saw, in a hillside gully overlooking the sea. The cave has a low ceiling, and its floor extends more or less horizontally into the rock. And you can see here, next image, you can see that there are 2 stalagmites that appear to have been sacred. one larger than the other, and they're positioned at the center of a shrine, complete with an altar and an encircling wall. Hence, the Minoans and later the Mycenaeans participated in a touching rite connected to the stalagmite, and that was considered magical. Many votive offerings were found here. Uh, Next image. And so let's take a look at some of the votive offerings. There's one. Here's another one. Next one. There we go. So pretty amazing stuff. Okay. Let's look at me for a few moments. So the worship of Aletheia, of course, passed from the Minoans to the Indo-Europeans, to the Mycenaeans, where she becomes an important goddess for them too, and found in Linear B tablets as Iriutuya. Also, according to the Mycenaean Linear B tablets, the goddess Aletheia had sacred shrines dedicated to her at the cities of Lato and Elatherna, as well as a sacred cave at a place known as Inatas, which is in southern Crete. Pretty amazing. And then, of course, obviously, during the Greek Dark Ages, 1100 to 800 BCE, this goddess finds herself mentioned in the Iliad, where she is described as the goddess of the pains of birth. And so we learn that she is directly connected to the beginning of life, yet this beginning is accompanied by suffering. So gradually, Aletheia moves from this great, powerful Minoan goddess and becomes relegated to a goddess connected to childbirth pains and labor and so forth. Well, it's time for us to conclude the civilization. Let's go to the next image. Unfortunately, this idyllic civilization did eventually fall in a cataclysmic event that defies almost imagination. First, there was a series of earthquakes that leveled the palaces upon Crete, and then a massive volcanic eruption happened at a place that will be known as Thera, which poisoned the atmosphere and sent massive tidal waves smashing against the islands and coastlines of this once great commercial power. The Thera eruption fragmented the island into several small pieces. Next image. And the caldera of the volcano sunk into the sea. After examining the size of the caldera, scientists have estimated that this eruption was about 5 times larger than the explosion of Krakatoa in 1883. 5 times larger. So about a 700 tons of TNT, like a 600 kiloton atomic bomb. The explosion launched debris and smoke up to 30 miles into the air. Not that the eruption was a complete surprise to the inhabitants of Thera, since apparently the earthquakes before the event warned the Minoans living at Akrotiri to abandon the site, which was buried under 25 to 50 feet of debris. Next image. I think I have a picture of, oh, I don't. Okay, put that one down. But Akrotiri is kind of like the Minoan Pompeii. The resulting tidal waves from the eruption destroyed all the palaces and cities on the northern coast of Crete. The structures at Amnisos were knocked out of alignment. Petros and Palacastro were destroyed. Ash layers was as high as 10 feet deep in some places too. While Galatas and Kamos were not directly destroyed, they quickly fell into decline. We got to remember that this eruption of Thera was 5 times greater than the eruption at Krakatoa. And since the eruption at Krakatoa produced tidal waves up to 50 feet, scientists have determined that the tidal waves resulting from Thera, knowing this, were between 100 and at its highest, through evidence, as high as 492 feet. That is, with seashells from that time literally wedged into the mountainside. As for when this event happened, estimates vary, with radiocarbon revealing dates ranging from 1627 to 1600 BCE. Because radiocarbon dating can be off by about a half century or more, uh, especially as you get earlier, the dating gets a little bit more off. By collaborating with Egyptian chronology, especially the Egyptian Tempest Stele of Ahmose I, which was erected in 1550 BCE, the eruption is sometimes suggested to have occurred around 1550 BCE. According to Alexander McGillivray, the eruption of Thera occurred during the reign of the Egyptian female pharaoh Hatshepsut between 1500 to 1483 BCE. But for many archaeologists, this date appears to be too late. Much of the radiocarbon data was collected from olive trees buried alive in the various pumice layers. The most recent from 2018, giving us dates anywhere between 1626 to 1605 BCE, yet taking into account all the sites from the Aegean Islands to Anatolia as far as Gordian, inclusive of trees and stalagmites via the calibration curve. The range expands. And so this massive event happened sometime between, by correlating all the evidence, between 1620 to 1560 BCE. Many will say that this eruption inspired the story of Atlantis, and scholars often attribute parts of Hesiod's theogony, especially on the Titan Maki, the war with the giants, to this event, because there's various descriptions accordingly. As the Minoan culture thrived on the island of Crete and about the surrounding Aegean Sea, mainland Greece was also developing a thriving culture. And so what's going to happen is that so before all this, meanwhile, the Mycenaeans, during the early Hellenic period, ranging from 2750 to 2000 BCE, a non-Indo-European people dominated Greece, who practiced agriculture and who possessed a metal industry. As a bit of trivia, villages whose endings are SSOS date from this period or earlier, so it's pre-Indo-European. Much like the Minoans, those living in Greece during the early Hellenic appeared to be peaceful. Then around 2000 BCE, the Indo-Europeans arrived into Greece, and so ushering in the Middle Hellenic period, ranging from 2000 to 1550. These invading Indo-Europeans were often ruthless, with villages of the non-Indo-Europeans either burned to the ground or abandoned. Yet in other cases, the Indo-Europeans and the earlier inhabitants were able to coexist and over a period of time blend together. These Indo-Europeans spoke Greek, and so we can say at this point, Greek culture enters Greece. These first Greeks were known as the Mycenaeans and had to learn to adapt to a very difficult terrain. It was often dry and hot and rocky, with jagged hills and mountains dividing up the landscape, creating a series of narrow valleys that were isolated from one another, giving rise to a sense of cultural independence from one valley to another. Up along the slopes and in the valleys, the Mycenaeans were most successful in growing grapes and olives, while those along the coastal regions were able to add a little fish into their diets. The Mycenaeans found eager trading partners with the Minoans to the south. By the late Hellenic period from 1550 to 1150 BCE, the Mycenaeans had developed into an urban as well as a rural culture, but they also became more aggressive. The beginning of this prosperity is evident from the material culture as early as around 1600 BCE, which is close to the time of the destruction of the Minoan culture, or I should say the weakening, not the destruction, the weakening of the Minoan culture as a result of the Thera eruption. So their cities began to become more extensive, their agricultural methods more advanced, their grave goods more rich, their artwork more elaborate, and found in more locations about the Aegean beyond the Greek mainland. The nearby idyllic civilization of the Minoans, of course, eventually became extremely weak as a result of the cataclysmic event that defies almost imagination. Of course, that is the Thera eruption. It did not destroy the Minoan civilization, but it made it vulnerable, and vulnerable especially to the Mycenaeans. So they were severely weakened. At first, when the Mycenaeans came then to a weakened Crete and other Minoan territories, at first the Mycenaeans attempted to adapt to Minoan culture and carry on the day-to-day business, keeping the bureaucracy efficient, even some of the positions. They, of course, necessitated, I was going to tell today, made it necessary to change things into Greek. But after 1400 BCE, there's another wave of Mycenaeans, and the pretense, I would say, was over. At this point, the wonderful Minoan palaces were abandoned, and there is a very strong evidence of decline. So this is what takes the place of these wonderful Minoans. No offense, but the Mycenaeans a little different. And I'm not going to go into too much depth on the Mycenaeans, but I just want to close with enough knowledge of the Mycenaeans so you get the idea that times were a changing. So let's take a look at the next image, and then we'll finish up. Okay, so here we have politically a collective monarchies ruled the Mycenaeans, each overseeing certain regions. Each king was known as a Wanix, who was essentially a warlord. Every operation within the palace was overseen by the Wanix, with basically the micromanagement, including paying the troops, approving all trade agreements, and the menu for the regular banquets, where there was much feasting going on. While the Wanix had an assistant called a Euagetus, which means the leader of the people, his role appears to be more religious in nature, advising the Wanix concerning the exact ritual expectations, which appear quite complicated indeed. In the same tradition of the Minoans, a very large bureaucracy supported the rulers, with many records in Linear B left behind concerning their daily financial transactions. From this evidence, we find evidence of a military aristocracy called a equita. Some possible translations of this word include companion. However, I favored the word as meaning more of a follower, as in second in command, even if the word at its root moves closer to our understanding of a companion or equal today. It is absolutely clear that the Wanix felt himself entitled to absolute rule. Recollect, these are the rulers that inspire such figures as Agamemnon and Menelaus in the Iliad and the Odyssey. There was no single Wanix, with the Mycenaeans divided into city-states, each having their own separate Wanix, and often they feuded with one another, as we will later see in the archaic and classical eras. Next image, of course, is this famous mask of Agamemnon found at Mycenae. It's pretty impressive. So this will be a representation of a Wanix. The Wanix possessed uh, directly their own tracts of land called the Temnos, the word later often used for the sacred lands around the temple. Following the Equetta, the area around the city was divided into districts with governors in charge called the Corator. There was also what was called the Damokoros, one who took care of the people. Next image. There's a great image of the Lion Gate of Mycenae. Look at those huge blocks. Next image. And you can see here, this is the division of Mycenaean Greece. And you can see you got Pylos there, and Menelon, and Mycenae, and Salamis, and Athens, and Thebes, and so forth. So it is split up. It is not unified. Next image. And of course, this is a great image. It's a little bit blurred. I don't know why it blurs here, but Mycenaean merchants traded animal skins and oil for luxury goods such as jewelry from the Minoans, the Egyptians, and also from Asia Minor. Sometimes these luxury goods were repurposed to conform more to their tastes and to contribute to their own craft industries. The Mycenaean kings came to believe that the accumulation of wealth revealed their power. So often, archaeologists find these expensive items buried with them in their tombs. At first, they were buried in shaft tombs, but by 1500 BCE, they were interred within tholos tombs. Yet these kings, uh, they kind of focus more upon warfare than trade. Are you seeing some differences already with the Minoans? Well, the Minoans were very much a peaceful people. The Mycenaeans, and about trade. The Mycenaeans were about warfare. Hence, the accumulated wealth from their trade was often used to pay for their military exploits. When they were not fighting some outside opponent, they were fighting one another. The kings and the noble class typically accumulated what wealth and profits were gained from with very little distribution to any other below their status. Once again, with the Minoans, you see more of a equal stratification, equal spread of the wealth. When it comes to the Mycenaeans, as opposed to the Minoans, it is the opposite. It is the very rich who have everything, and those below it have basically hardly anything at all. In contrast to Minoan cities with no defensive fortifications until the last couple of centuries, and then relatively small, thick fortress walls surround the Mycenaean cities. As for their artwork, so much of the artwork was based upon themes of war and hunting, as opposed to all the beautiful things you just saw. Although, given that there's still a survival of certain Minoan uh, um, aesthetics that will continue to a certain degree with the Mycenaeans, that will eventually survive the Dark Era and go into archaic, classical, and Hellenistic Greece. This is part of the legacy of the Minoans, of these things, this appreciation of beauty and art for art's sake. But you can see that the Mycenaeans are definitely not a luxury-based societies. To facilitate both the quick movement of troops for war and trade, next image, let's take a look at some troops. There's some Mycenaean troops. The Mycenaeans created a series of roads that effectively held mainland Greece together. Beyond that, the Mycenaeans created extensive harbors like Apilos that traded throughout the Mediterranean, with the city of Troy, a key access point between the Aegean and the Black Sea, and Cyprus as the pivotal island connected with trade along the Levant. Uh, but the Mycenaeans were also notorious pirates, moving along the coasts of the Mediterranean, plundering other merchant vessels, pillaging coastal cities, and stealing whatever they can, including people, from the various lands they explored. The Hittites mention these Mycenaean raiders, as do the Egyptians. One such wealthy coastal city, of course, was Troy, as just mentioned. And of course, after 10 years, the Mycenaeans were able to take it. Following, of course, the eruption of Thera, a series of earthquakes, they obviously took much of Crete, as to be expected, as being from an Indo-European background. Next image, the Mycenaeans. There's a nice warrior type. Next image. Oh, I guess we don't have that one image there. Okay, that's fine. Uh, we'll take that down. So, in contrast, the Indo-Europeans, because they're Indo-Europeans, uh, they are patriarchal. So what will happen is that you have with the Minoans a society. I'm not saying it's patriarchal. I'm not saying it's matriarchal. It's more kind of egalitarian, kind of the remnant of an earlier age. The Indo-Europeans are definitely patriarchal. So what will happen is women will move uh, from having equal opportunities in certain occupations to be relegated to certain labors defined by their gender. Often women were organized into work groups associated with various craft industries, inclusive of textiles. Often women became reduced to being possessions, to be bartered and traded. We find this custom later integrated into the Homeric epics and other mythological stories that have roots going back to the Mycenaean era. The one occupation still open to women, as in the past, was, of course, being a religious functionary inclusive of high priestess. As for the Mycenaean religion, their beliefs, they are polytheistic, worshiping a series of Indo European gods who are the early precursors of the Greek gods that are familiar with most who are informed of Greek mythology. And of course, we can go on with that, but I think we have enough to understand. We do have their writing. It is Linear B, and the good news is we can read that. We can read it fluently, but we also, because of that, we know a lot about not only them, but the culture that was before them, the Minoans. However, you can see that this is an interesting legacy that the Minoan civilization, you had a chance to be able to go through and see for yourself what this culture was all about. And you can tell immediately that it is very different and unique, not only from the Mycenaeans who succeed them, but they are unique as a culture, even from a large world scale perspective. They were a society that lived for art's sake. They were a society that had accumulated enough wealth that there was more of an equal distribution. It was a society that focused upon nature, that focused upon our connection with the natural world, but also moving into the ideas connected to that which is abstract. They took what was in nature and they were also able to use their imagination to connect with deeper and other kinds of themes. They seem to really enjoy life. They enjoyed sports. They enjoyed good meals. They enjoyed going out into nature. They enjoyed dance. They enjoyed song. They enjoyed, ecstatic expressions and poppies, possibly, right? They also had the sense of freedom where women could do the same jobs as men. And I find this as refreshing in many ways. This was a society where women definitely had an important piece within the puzzle. Uh, I can't say enough. The Minoans are a society that, even though we can't idealize them, they are absolutely not perfect. We still can connect to their sensibility that maybe perhaps we should seek an aesthetic of peace with nature, peace with our environment, and the enjoyment of life, of celebration, of ecstasy, of joy. And when I take a look at Minoan pieces of art, this is what I feel. I feel inspired that this civilization not only existed, but it lasted for so long. Thank you so much, and I hope you have a great night.